the nature of God's creation. One of the things that we see in this is the teaching of evolution or origins. The idea that man and all life has evolved from lower life forms to higher and continue to evolve. Ultimately, the goal of that teaching, which sometimes people don't realize, but it comes out, is that man will eventually evolve into a God himself. And this finds various forms, expressions of this idea in other different religions. And so this is nothing new, but has been, right from the fall of man in the garden, is one of the original lies that Satan told Eve in the garden. Thou shalt be as gods. And Satan misrepresents God to Eve in that God knows this, and he wants to keep all this to himself. He doesn't want you to become his equal. Why? Because that's what Satan wanted to do. He wanted to be the equal of God. He wanted to set his throne above the throne of God. He was lifted up with pride. And so he projects this to Eve with the idea that God just doesn't want you to know this, because he doesn't want you to become a God like him and be in competition with him. That wasn't it at all, but that's a lie. But you see how this permeates into thinking in the world. This is a very pagan view of man and the creation of man and origins of man. And so we see the idea that man himself can become a God. We see in 2 Peter chapter 3, he talks about all things continue, questioning the very creation of God. It said, for this they're willingly ignorant. The evidence is there, but they close their minds to that evidence because they've already made up their minds that man is evolving and man is going to become a God. There is no creator that we have to give an account to. There is no judgment. There is no sin, really. We're evolving, and one day we'll be gods. 1 Timothy 6 verse 20, Paul warns Timothy there. 1 Timothy chapter 6. O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science falsely so called. Evolution is not science. We have been told and told and told that this is scientific fact to the point that people have come to believe it. And was that not the very premise that the Nazi propagandists used and said, if you tell a lie often enough, loud enough, people will believe it? And that's what people have done with evolution. They have told a lie that this is science. This has been proven scientifically. There's no question. Don't even question it. Why don't they want you to question? Because if you start looking deep enough, you'll find out it's a lie. It does not happen. It cannot happen the way they say it does. The earth is not millions and millions of years old. There's evidence that it is much younger than that, but they want to ignore it. They are willingly ignorant. And they say all things continue, and that's a part of that evolutionist idea and mindset is that all things continue. Uniformitarianism, that was the word I was looking for. Uniformitarianism is that all things are continuing at the same rate now that we observe that they've always been continuing at that same rate, and that's just not scientifically correct. And so it talks about science falsely so called, which some professing, some who? Believers, have erred concerning the faith. To buy into it, to buy into that the earth is millions of years old, is to err concerning the faith. To buy into evolution is to err concerning the faith. Denies the Genesis account of a literal six-day creation. Seeks to establish origins apart from the one true God. And he talks about nature. Changed nature. The nature of man. Man was mutable. He could change, and he fell from his original state by his own will and choice, and as a result was changed. He said by nature in Ephesians chapter 2, he said we're by nature the children of wrath, even as others. Just as the tares look just like the wheat until they began to mature and bring forth fruit. Then so before we are saved, we're just like the rest of the world. It denies the depravity and original sin. Also the order and purpose of the genders, male and female, says changed to that which is against nature. We see the nature of God's plan of salvation. For by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. Boasting goes with pride. Pride is sin. Boasting is sin. If it was by works, he said it's all right then to sin. No, it's not of works, lest any man should boast. It is not by man's merit, righteousness, or goodness. And one more corrupted doctrine, the nature of the Lord's church. Matthew 16, verses 18 through 19, I will build my church, or ecclesia, which is the Greek word, which is a compound word. It means a called out assembly. Some people want to just shorten it to just the call. That's not what the word ecclesia means. It's a called out assembly. Unless there's an assembly, it's not a church. It's not an ecclesia. It is a congregation, local, visible, has been changed into a universal, visible kingdom, which is the Catholic perversion, or universal, invisible of all the saved, which is the Protestant perversion. Again, Satan did not create or start his own church, but corrupted and perverted true churches of Christ into synagogues of Satan, or congregations of Satan. Unlawful assemblies. Churches of Christ in name only, but without a candlestick, which has been removed. These are some of the things, the doctrine, and there's many more. We're just kind of scraping the surface here, but showing what is the works, the evil fruits of the false prophets and teachers and the tares that are among us and can be identified by false doctrine. They teach for doctrine the commandments of men. And so they pervert the teachings of God. Everything that God says, they take it and they pervert it into something else, and that's what they're teaching. They are changing it. Now, Luke 1, he talks about those things which most surely believed among us. Those things that are believed. Tonight in part 2, we will look at some of the traditions or practices, the things wherein thou hast been instructed, Luke 1:4. And 1 Corinthians 4:17, and Paul talks about those traditions that he teaches in all the churches. We'll look at that this evening. So this is part one on tares. Tares that the enemy, Satan, has sown in the same field and amongst the wheat, the good seed, which God has sown. Let us, I will stop at this point, come back this evening for part two.